The Seahawks didn't wear helmets or pads yesterday, but they were arguably the biggest winner in the NFC West, thanks to a couple games going their way. One in particular, we'll be diving how the Seahawks jumped the standings, not just in the division, but in the NFC in a loaded Monday episode coming your way here, Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s tuning in. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it, whether you're listening in nearby Pullman, Washington, in the land of the Cougars, or over in Lansing, Michigan. Thanks to all of you who take the time to listen to our podcast 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate you. The Seahawks going to be returning to action this week, and maybe with a little bit more hitch in their step coming out of the bye week, not just because they're going to be fresh, but because they are in first place in the division. The San Francisco 49ers falling on Sunday. We're going to take a look at where things stand both in the division and in playoff seeding. I know it's only week 8 going into week 9, but things are starting to take shape. We're going to dive into all of that today. We've got a Monday mailbag, and then we're going to dish out our second half prime time players to watch. Who's going to elevate their games, or who needs to elevate their games for the Seahawks to hold on in the NFC West and make some noise in the postseason. All that coming your way, courtesy of our friends at Game Time. Download a Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Now for your lead story here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Leonard Williams, Sam Darnold, and company may have been chilling at home this weekend, but that doesn't mean they weren't winners in the standings. In fact, it's hard to argue that many teams, if any, were bigger winners than the Seahawks this weekend, as they jumped into first place in the NFC West by virtue of the 49ers going down to Houston and losing a game that felt like it was not as close as the final score indicated. Honestly, simply the Texans really dominated that game from start to finish. San Francisco falls to 5-3. The Rams and the Cardinals were both off too, but the Rams don't have a win in the division yet. So with the Seahawks being 1-1 by that virtue, with that tiebreaker, if the playoffs started today, they would be the division champions in the NFC West. I don't know that this weekend could have gone much better for Seattle. I mean, even the teams that were chasing them in the wild card race, the Chicago Bears and the Carolina Panthers, they pulled a Mario Kart here and slipped on a banana and had awful games yesterday. And so it created some separation for them with teams behind them in the standings as well. A very fruitful weekend while not having to see the field.
Yeah, it worked out beautifully for Seattle. As you said, by virtue of the San Francisco 49ers losing that game, Seattle is now in the NFC West leader. If the playoffs were to start today, they would be hosting in the divisional round of the playoffs. I certainly like the sound of that. They would be the number 4 seed overall. The Green Bay Packers are, of course, number 1 seed. They had a very impressive victory over Aaron Rodgers and the Pittsburgh Steelers in Pittsburgh on Sunday Night Football. They have the number 1 seed. They would have the 1 bye. Then you have the Philadelphia Eagles at 6-2, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at 6-2. Those two clubs are ahead of Seattle in terms of the seedings, the number 2 and number 3 seeds respectively. And then the Seahawks sitting pretty at the number 4 seed, just 1 game away from potentially having the number 1 seed in the NFC and they having that first round bye.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned all that. I'm going to dive into the full NFC picture here in a second, but I really want to look at the division first here because I'm fascinated with how this is developing when you look at the standings right now. Again, the Seahawks and Rams are tied for first place. If you're looking at tiebreakers, the first one when it comes to division titles is division record. A head-to-head would be before that, but the Seahawks and Rams have yet to play, Rob, so it goes down to that number 2 tiebreaker, which is the divisional record. The Rams don't have a win in the division yet. The Seahawks are 1-1 thanks to their win against Arizona. So they're in first place. the 49ers at 5-3 are still tied with the Seahawks for second highest odds to win the NFC West. It's half a game that they're behind. It's not like they dropped way out of the race. The Cardinals, on the other hand, now at 2-5, they were still licking their wounds in this bye week, plus 10,000 for them to win the NFC West. They're not completely out of the playoffs just yet, wild card wise, if they could get on a streak, but this is really a 3-horse race. And now the Seahawks, it feels like it's kind of going to be like a Kentucky Derby type thing where you're just going to see one horse get just a head in front, and then another one will get a head in front, and then another one. And it's just going to be going back and forth till the end of the season. That's just the way that this feels right now. But the Seahawks got the benefit of the fact that the Texans, the team that they just beat on Monday Night Football, C.J. Stroud looked like a different quarterback on Sunday against San Francisco. And the Seahawks are happy about that because he was able to put a lot of points on the board early, and that was without his top 2 receivers who were out in that game. Houston brought it, and defensively they made life tough for Mac Jones. So San Francisco, they slip back now into 3rd place. And again, they're not out of it. They're barely behind here, but it's a big loss losing to a team that was 2-4 going into that matchup, and certainly it hurt San Francisco's chances of winning this division. And then when you look from a conference standpoint, Rob, I know that some of our listeners are going to say, why are we talking about playoff seeding in week 8? In which my response is, why would we not be? Because look at the way things are already shaping up here. You've got a 5-1-1 team with the number 1 seed in the Packers. You've got a couple of 6-2 teams in Philadelphia and Tampa Bay that are right nipping on their heels. And Seattle's right there too. If the Seahawks get the win this weekend against the Commanders and they go to 6-2, this is very much, you're looking at right now, you've got 6, maybe 7 teams that are still in the hunt maybe for that number 1 seed. I'm not going to count San Francisco out just yet. And we're at this stage of the season, and there's that many teams that are jockeying for position where they have almost identical records. That makes this a lot of fun. It also makes it stressful because all you got to do is just slip up one week and then suddenly you're the 7 seed or you're out of the playoffs because of how crowded it is at the top. But at the same time, though, there's not a team that's undefeated that's running away with this either. So the Seahawks are truly in a great position to get one of those top couple seeds, and they are very much in the hunt for that number 1 seed. If they can get their mojo fully back at Lumen Field, that can still be a very dangerous weapon in January for Mike Macdonald's team.
Oh, no question about it, because then the weather's going to turn. And that's the thing, is that Seattle's recipe for success continues to be what it has been. Defense, running the football, albeit not necessarily quite as successfully as Seahawks fans would like, but still running the football consistently. And then Sam Darnold's precision over the top. That is a recipe that is as proven as football gets. And so it could absolutely be the recipe that the Seahawks need to get back into a deep playoff run, perhaps even a Super Bowl run. And I think that when you look at those 7 teams that are currently slated for the playoffs, again, it just demonstrates what we've been talking about the entire time, Corbin, just that the West Coast is the best coast, frankly, that the NFC West is clearly the best division in football. 3 of the teams that Seattle, or 3 NFC West teams are among those 7 there in the playoffs. So again, the only other team the only other division that has 2 teams in that race right now is, of course, the NFC North, with the Green Bay Packers as the number 1 seed and the Detroit Lions as, I believe it was, the 5 seed. So again, the fact that there's 3 teams in the NFC West there, it shows the power of the division, but it also shows how much is left to be run in this triple crown kind of a horse race, as you said it before, because of course the Seahawks have already played the 49ers once. The Rams have played the 49ers once. In both cases, San Francisco, of course, emerged victorious, but Seattle has yet to play Los Angeles, and obviously they have rematches against the 49ers as well, both clubs. So there is an awful lot of this race yet to be run, but again, Seattle is in an excellent position to basically control their own destiny. And considering the fact that among San Francisco and Los Angeles Rams, Seattle feels the healthiest at this point, it is a very exciting kind of a spot to be. I will say this, as far as this weekend's game, obviously Seattle is going to be traveling on the road to the nation's capital, face the Commanders, who might be getting their star quarterback, Jaden Daniels, back. Remains to be seen, of course, on that front for Sunday Night Football. But the Los Angeles Rams host the New Orleans Saints. I mean, that's the worst team in football right now, at least the owners of the potential number one overall selection in the 2026 NFL draft. And the San Francisco 49ers are going to be playing the Giants. It is in New York, but at the same time, those feel like winnable games for the 49ers and the Rams. So it's critical that Seattle keeps up this momentum in the nation's capital Sunday night.
Yep, that's the downside when you're in a division that's this competitive at the top. There's not much margin for error, so you got to take care of business. And this will be a tough road game in Landover, Maryland. There's no question about it. But the Seahawks are hoping that they are going to be a lot healthier, maybe even having Robbie Oots back this week. He practiced today. 21-day window open. We'll see if they're going to move him onto the roster that quickly, but certainly a healthier looking team as they get ready for this second half stretch run after the bye. When we come back, we've got a Monday mailbag. We're going to dive into your questions on Facebook, X, Blue Sky, YouTube, you name it. We've got questions from all over the place. We're going to get as many of them answered as we can. That'll be coming up next here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the daily fantasy app where making the right call can actually pay off. You and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right means cashing in with football back. Prize Picks, the simplest and fastest way to get in on the action. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player projections, and you can turn your takes into real prizes, all in less than 60 seconds. I've been playing Prize Picks lately, and it's such a fun way to stay locked in for the season. It's quick, easy, and honestly, my favorite way to follow along with football. I love checking projections like Josh Allen for more or less than 270 passing yards, or Ken Walker III for more or less than 1 rushing touchdown. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's the code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. This episode is also brought your way by Rougiat. What do you get when you have a bald eagle standing on top of a silverback gorilla riding a T-Rex? That's what you call pure confidence. If you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rougiat Go Long. Rougiat Go Long isn't just another ED pill. It's a total game changer for your confidence. Go Long combines 2 doctor-trusted medications in 1 dual-action formula so you can get hard and go the distance. The effects can last up to 36 hours. That's confidence all day, all night, and even into the next day. The process is simple. Connect with a board-certified doctor 100% online, and if prescribed, your treatment ships discreetly right to your door. Ready to level up your confidence in the bedroom? Head to rugiet.com and use the promo code LOCKEDNFL for 15% off your first order. That's rugiet.com, promo code LOCKEDNFL. Make sure to use our code so they know we sent you. Welcome back to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. He's Rob Rang. A special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in. And thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. It is the Monday after a bye week. So, of course, we've got to get to the mailbag and get as many questions answered as possible. And, Rob, I don't know that we've ever gotten messages on more social media platforms at one time than we did this particular mailbag. So I'm excited to open it up from a number of different places. We'll start with our old standby here on X. Question coming from Chris Rosa. Who are realistic options for right guard that could be explored during the trade deadline? Could Evan Neal be someone that is worth taking a look at? I know that you mentioned Evan Neal last week, and look, it hasn't worked out in New York. He isn't even starting for the Giants. It's been rough for the former top 10 pick, but you and I both loved him a lot coming out of Alabama, and he's still a really young player that has really athletic profile. Maybe he just needs a change of scenery.
That's my thinking. I've always been a big fan of Evan Neal's talent. I think that he is better suited inside as a guard. I don't know that he is the perfect schematic fit for what the Seahawks are looking to do. His game has always been about just sheer size and power. But at the same time, I do think that he would be an upgrade, in my opinion, over what the Seahawks currently have in Anthony Bradford. He checks the box, certainly, of what John Schneider has liked to do in the past as far as these reclamation projects of former early draft picks. So I think that makes some sense. And I think that you, sir, mentioned Jackson Powers Johnson, who has a little bit of positional versatility as center and guard. And of course, he is playing with Pete Carroll and the Las Vegas Raiders. Obviously, there would be a great deal of familiarity there as well.
Yeah, those are all good options. I still think that Cesar Ruiz is somebody that would be worth calling about as well. Next question here from Linda Devlin on Facebook. Do we have the right type of running backs for Clint Kubiak's offense? I think Seattle's got the right guys. I think that it's still a work in progress, though. And I've talked about this on our podcast, Rob. I've written about it on Emerald City Spectrum. I've done film breakdowns on it. Not everyone agrees with me, and that's okay. I'm going to stick with my guns here. I played running back for a long time. I've coached running back for a long time. I still have concerns about Ken Walker III's vision and his ability to read blocks properly. That has been the biggest hiccup for him, in my opinion. It hasn't even been the injuries. I think the vision and almost playing too fast and too sporadic. Like you think of a running back, like I want my running back running 100 mile an hour all the time. But that's not the case, particularly when you're trying to let your block set up in front of you or on zone plays. You're trying to get the defenders to declare what they're going to do. Your read defender, which normally it's the 3-tech or 2-tech, maybe the middle linebacker against some schemes. You're going to have a read defender. You got to give them a chance to make their declaration where they're going to go and then make your read off that. And I think that is still a major work in progress for Ken Walker III, even in his 4th season. But I think he's clearly got the skills, and there's been flashes. He's been one of the most explosive backs, a lot of explosive runs this year. And I think Charbonnet, when they use him correctly and he's not getting pitches all the time and gets downhill, can do a lot of good things. And I think he's more effective right now in terms of making those reads off of his blocks, making quick cuts, decisive cuts. I think the talent's there. It's still a work in progress. And some of this is on the blocking too, where those guys are still trying to figure out the scheme and the targeting and all those things. Once that comes together, I think the negative plays will go down, and then you'll see that really start to come through for these running backs. But line and the backs both have work to do coming out of this bye. Next question here for Rob, and this one's coming off Blue Sky. What are the coaches writing, marking on those play sheets? Is it a yes or no? I've been curious for a good while what they're actually jotting down. I love this question, Rob, because even sometimes as a former coach, I'm sitting there like, what is Andy Reid writing down there on that play sheet? Or what is Mike McDonald writing down? And I think it's kind of an open-ended thing if you think about it.
Yeah, I think it's probably their lunch order. No, I mean, in all seriousness, I think of just whatever note that they happen to be writing at that moment. I mean, it could just be a mental breakdown. That's something that they want to talk about during the halftime. It could be a possible personnel move. Maybe something that the coach from that vantage point saw that might be different from what the guys up in the booth might have seen. But I think that it is going to be as varied as there are coaches out there, because again, everybody's going to be different. I think with Mike McDonald, that is likely going to be on the defensive side of the ball, or in moments where he feels that Seattle is making some type of just an unforced mental error. And that is the kind of the impression I get from the limited conversations that I've had with the folks around him. Mike McDonald and I have never had a one-on-one conversation, but I've been on enough sidelines and looked over the shoulders of enough coaches that is typically the type of things that they are writing really quickly in between snaps of a football game.
And as a former coach, a former offensive coordinator, albeit at the JV level, at the high school level, I can also say this. For me, I like to write down notes like, okay, this play worked. But let's go back to this with some variations, or maybe there's a wrinkle off of it. And that was something that I did that I'm sure a lot of your play callers and defensively did that too, where, hey, this worked. Let's show them similar look with different wrinkle to it. And you can go back to it at the game, keep notes on it. So I think those are all things that you see during the course of a game from a coaching staff. And it's a blur while it's going on. I can tell you that right now. Next question from Jason Yee. How do you guys think the snap splits will look this coming week and out with the secondary getting back healthy? Seems to me like a few talented players in the sidelines, no matter which lineup the Hawks decide to roll out on the back end. I am fascinated to see this, mainly because of what's happened in the nickel position, the slot spot the last couple of weeks. Nick Eamon-Warry has basically taken over that spot, even with the fact that Darion Kendrick did some really good things earlier in the season. He can't do some of the stuff that Eamon-Warry can. He's not near as big. He's not as effective of a blitzer. In terms of run defense, Eamon-Warry is built like a linebacker hybrid with an outside linebacker edge guy. And he's a huge guy that you can do a lot of different stuff with. And he's more athletic than what Darion Kendrick is. But now you're getting Devin Witherspoon most likely back. I'm going to say that just because Mike McDonald isn't going to say anything until the week progresses on his status. But I really think that we have a chance now to see what you and I talked about in training camp, where they're going to run some dime sets where both those guys are playing in the slot on either side. And it becomes a pick your poison type thing for opposing offensive coordinators. You can blitz one, you can send both, or you can drop them both back into coverage, do a lot of different stuff. You can run inverted coverages. I expect you're still going to see a ton of Nick Eamon-Warry, even though Devin Witherspoon is going to be out the full time. What I'm wondering is Reek Woolen the one that's going to get the brunt of this in terms of being on the sideline? Because I expect Devin Witherspoon's going to play more in the boundary and Eamon-Warry is going to play in the slot to make sure he's on the field. You're only going to have room for two boundary corners in that case, unless you're in dime. So I think that Woolen could be the one that ends up being the one that loses snaps here. So I'm really curious to see how this rotation takes place, especially with the fact that they might want to get Tayakata some reps, the third safety in some of these sets, or fourth safety for that matter. I am very fascinated to see what Mike McDonald does when he has all hands on deck, because he hasn't had that since like the third play from scrimmage in week one. Hasn't really had a chance to do that. Next question here for Rob, coming off of Facebook. One of my favorite things about sports is seeing rookies make their way in the pro leagues. Eamon-Warry is phenomenal. Last year, one of the guys I was really hopeful for was Satawa Lamea. What happened? This question from David Moore on Facebook. Look, he's on the Saints practice squad now. Like, this is not a case where a guy was kept. Like, they moved on from him completely, which is stunning considering he started 6 games and had some positive flashes in that time last year.
Well, I think there's a number of things that happen. For one, I think the expectations of Satawa Lamea were just kind of, risen to the point where basically a lot of Seahawks fans were expecting him to be competing for a starting spot. And I shouldn't just say Seahawks fans, I myself was expecting him to compete for a starting spot. I thought that his athletic ability, while he didn't test particularly well, he played with quickness, at least at Utah. And I thought during his rookie season that he should be able to be productive. But obviously, John Benton, Rick Dennison, and ultimately Mike McDonald, didn't think that there was quite as good of a fit. And so I think that from a scheme and standpoint that he just wasn't quite the fit that these coaches thought that he could be. I think that his size, he was always viewed as a little bit of a tweener. He was, a guy that could be a guard. He could be a tackle. He wasn't really a star at any one of them. And frankly, I think that Seattle just upgraded all around him. Obviously, the first-round selection of Gray Zabel. You get now a healthy Abe Lucas. You get a more versatile player in Josh Jones. So, again, I think all of those things contributed to the fact that Satawa Lamea basically was the outside looking in early on in training camp, and it just got worse as camp and the preseason went on.
And let's just face it, he did not look good ever. Like, he didn't look good in the preseason games. He struggled on the practice field. He was losing out third-team reps. So the writing just seemed to be on the wall. I actually was kind of surprised that he ended up back on the practice squad, given the way things had gone. It just seemed like he was in the coach's doghouse. And I guess I wasn't surprised they moved on from him a few weeks later, and the Saints now have him in New Orleans on their practice squad. Our last question here from Brandon on X. Do you believe if no trade occurs, it indicates John Schneider doesn't believe the Seahawks are in a position to be competitive? Feels like they have a huge area of weakness, and Sellers have players that can fill it, whether it's a receiver or a linebacker, or could be another position. if they don't make a trade, that is the last thing that I would think that John Schneider is thinking, because John Schneider, I can't tell you the last time that, I mean, maybe there was a point in that 2021 season when they finished 7-10 where it's like, no, this ain't our year. But generally, John Schneider's always looking for ways to upgrade the roster, and he's been very active at the deadline. If a deal doesn't come to fruition, I think it's either because the price point just didn't fall to where he wanted it to be. He's always looking for bargains this time of year. He's not going to be slinging unless, I mean, Leonard Williams, that was a significant upgrade. Dwayne Brown, there's been times they've given up some big picks, but it's generally been day 3 selections. If that kind of a deal doesn't come together, or there's not a big name that is out there, like let's say that Myles Garrett says, I want to waive my no trade clause. Like John Schneider calls about that, but then they can't make it happen. Then he might just decide, you know what? I'm getting Devin Witherspoon, Julian Love back. I'm getting Derek Hall back. Look, those are trade deadline additions for us off the injury reports. And there's some guys that could be coming off injury reserve too. So I don't think it would be a case of he's not thinking they're going to be competitive. Quite the opposite. I just don't think he's going to make a trade for the sake of making a trade. He's not going to deal away a first-round pick for somebody that isn't worth it. He is going to make sure it's the right value. And if it does come together, then he'll make a trade. If not, Seattle does have a lot of pieces coming back that can make this roster better without giving up any draft picks for the future. So I would say it would be anything but the fact that they're not thinking they're competitive. I think John Schneider absolutely thinks that this team is going to be ready to compete for an NFC West title and potentially a Super Bowl this year. When we come back, hey, we've got 10 games left on the schedule. We're going to be diving into our primetime players, the players that we think need to step up for the Seahawks to maintain a lead in the NFC West, win the division, and make some noise in the postseason. We'll get to that coming up next year on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by Game Time. NFL season is back and better than ever. Honestly, there's nothing better than being in the stadium surrounded by fans cheering on your team. But let's be honest, getting tickets, it can be a major hassle, whether it's login screens, prices jumping up, $20, $30 at checkout. It's frustrating. That's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to fans. Game Time is fast, easy, and backed by the Game Time guarantee. You'll always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and the best price. Plus, all fees are included. So the price you see is the price you pay. I pull up on Game Time, and in just a couple of clicks, I get amazing deals. I'm talking your favorite NFL games as low as $90 to $100. The app made it super simple. I can even see the exact view from my seat before I buy. And they offer zone deals as well. Pick the section, Game Time picks the seats, and you save big. It's faster, cheaper, and less stressful than any other way I've bought tickets. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDINNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's the promo code LOCKEDONFL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. This episode is also brought your way by FanDuel. The NFL season's in the midst of Week 9. FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to bet. If you're somebody like me that enjoys player props, such as how many touchdowns Sam Darnold will throw against the Commanders on Sunday Night Football, or you like to build a same-game parlay with multiple prop bets for one of the games on the Week 9 slate, or just jumping in live for quick bets as the action unfolds. It makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. It's quick, it's easy, and it's the best way to add a little more energy to Sundays. So are you ready to play? Download a FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Welcome back to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This is your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s tuning in. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. The Seahawks back in action with a abbreviated practice today. No major injury news coming out. Of course, Mike McDonald, with no injury reports needed till Wednesday, was not going to be giving out any state secrets like that. But Commanders, who are playing right now against the Chiefs. The Seahawks will be playing them on Sunday Night Football in Landover, looking to get to 6-2. And they've got 10 games left in the schedule. And Rob, you and I, we always like to do this coming out of the bye week. And This year, with this being fairly close to being a 50-50 split in the middle of the season, there is 10 games left. There's only been 7 played, but closer to the midway point, there's 10 games left to try to win this division. It's time to bust out our primetime players. And what I always love about this is we keep this as a wide open thing. And it's 3 players that we think need to step up or need to play at a certain level, elevate their play to a certain level for this team to hold on and win the NFC West and do damage in the postseason. So it could be a superstar that you think just needs to keep being on a historic pace. It could be a star player who's had a good but not great year. It could be somebody who's been hurt. It could be a rookie that's still learning the ropes that breaks out in the second half. And I think this is going to be a lot of fun diving into our PTPs, our primetime players that we think are going to need to shoulder the load for this team to be able to win this really competitive NFC West.
Yeah, I think that you did a really nice job of articulating just some of the different strategies that you can use to figure out who are your PTPers, your primetime players. And I'll just try to give you the relatively simple way I looked at it. To me, Corbin, there are 6 players that are currently why the Seahawks are in first place in the NFC West. And I think it's fairly indisputable that these are the 6 guys. They're Sam Darnold, they're Jackson Smith-Njigba, they're Charles Cross, 3 guys on offense, there's 3 guys on defense, Leonard Williams, Byron Murphy, and Ernest Jones. And so to me, any one of those 6 players you certainly could talk about. But the 3 players that I want to talk about are not among those 6. These are the guys that I think if Seattle wants to go on that deep playoff run, go back to the Super Bowl, then I think these next 3 players are the ones that are going to have to come back and play incredibly well to take Seattle over the top. And so those players have already performed well, but I think that they have to bring it to a whole different level. I'm going to start off with DeMarcus Lawrence. And I think that DeMarcus Lawrence's value to the Seahawks was very evident in the loss to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Their inability to get off the field, their inability to create any type of consistent pressure. I think that the fact that he was out of that game, I think, again, you could just see the difference that he makes to me. He is that junkyard dog, one of the more physical and aggressive and just violent players in all of the NFL. I thought that he was a key addition to the Seahawks, and I'm curious to see if he is able to maintain that level of play and perhaps rub off on the rest of Seattle's talented defensive line, but one that does not have a lot of playoff experience as he does. I'll mention another player on the defensive side of the ball because I do think that that's the most important part of this for the Seahawks to really make that big run, and that, of course, being Devin Witherspoon. I just think that his tenacity, his instincts, his game-breaking ability, that is, to me, one of the things that has been missing from this defense is just the ability to create turnovers and take it back to the house. And I think that he is a guy that can be absolutely critical in that regard. And then finally, Kenneth Walker III. Look, I think that he's played okay to this point. We had a conversation before about whether he is actually a good fit in this offense. I don't think that he's the cleanest fit in an outside zone offense, but I do think that his, again, big play ability can make this offense take this offense to an entirely different level. Mike McDonald basically said as much when he was asked about the running game during today's press conference. He said the running game is everything. Well, everything to me is a little bit of an overstatement considering how well that Sam Darnold, Jackson Smith-Njigba are playing at this point. But still, I do think if you want to go to the Super Bowl, then you have to have the ability to run the football consistently and have big play ability. Kenneth Walker III brings that, like no other running back on Seattle's roster.
I'm going to flip the script here. You went defense to offense. I'm going to start on the offensive side of the football. And Jackson Smith-Njigba, would I love it if he breaks Calvin Johnson's record this year? Oh, absolutely. And I'm not saying that it can't happen. However, I don't think that this Seahawks team is going to reach its peak potential unless Cooper Kupp gets a little bit more involved in terms of targets. And I don't think that this has been Kupp's fault necessarily. He's since week 1 when he had a couple uncharacteristic missed opportunities. I mean, when he's had the ball thrown his direction, he's made plays. He's won downfield. He's been one of the best run blocking receivers out there. He gives value beyond what you get in the passing game, but he's got 1 touchdown so far this year. His numbers, it's a massive drop-off from Jackson Smith-Njigba to Kupp, and he's clearly been their number 2 receiver. Barner's been the number 2 guy in terms of red zone and just being a guy that's been more targeted. But they are going to need at some point, they are going to need Cooper Kupp. I don't think you need him to be the Triple Crown version from 2021, but you're going to need him to be a guy that can get you 8-9 catches and can get you 90 to 100 receiving yards. There's going to be some games where they're going to really need him to step up in the red zone too. To me, for this offense to get to that next level, there's got to be another receiver that consistently is, and maybe Torrey Horton ends up being this guy, but I'm more confident than on a game-to-game basis with Horton being a rookie. I'm more confident Cooper Kupp can deliver that, and I just think that there's going to be a lot of opportunities for him there. So to me, I think Kupp's got to be a primetime guy on offense. As for the defensive side of the football, echoing what you said with Devin Witherspoon, Julian Love has got to be in this discussion because I think Julian Love can be one of those guys that is on the short list. If Seattle makes a deep playoff run, I think you got to have Julian Love's name on there as a guy that made it happen because he's that talented. He's a player that can come up and make tackles in the alley. He can pick off passes from the slot or either safety position. Even outside if you need him, not that they're going to use him in that capacity, but just an incredibly high IQ football player that gets all of his guys lined up. He has such an impact on the play of everyone else with his communication skills and his football knowledge and just his playmaking ability. Getting him back on the field makes everybody else in that secondary and quite frankly, the entire defense better because of that. And he's another guy that can create turnovers in bunches when he gets going. So I think Julian Love is another player that absolutely is going to need to step up. You need to hope that he stays healthy. And the last guy that I'm picking here, I've been torn on because there's a few guys I was considering, but I'm actually going to go, maybe some people will view this into left field, but I'm going to say a guy that's had two really good games in a row here. I was going to go Boye Mafe, but I'm going Drake Thomas because I think when you look at this defense that Mike McDonald runs, when you watch the Ravens when they were the number one ranked scoring defense a few years ago, what was arguably the strongest position on that entire team? Inside linebacker. They had two very good ones. You already have a really good one in Ernest Jones. If you can get Drake Thomas to play close to the level that he's played the last two games, and he can carry that through in the second half, with how important that position is in this defensive scheme, that could be an under-the-radar way that this defense gets to the next level, especially he gets more confidence and he starts making more plays and missing less tackles. That's the biggest issue he's had is finishing tackles. I'm looking at that position and just thinking, especially with the way teams like the Rams and 49ers have attacked the middle of the field with their offenses, you got to have linebackers that can cover 20 yards back, and you got to be able to cover sideline to sideline. Drake Thomas is proving he can do that, but can you do it for the entire rest of the season? If he does, I think that could be a real difference maker for the Seattle Seahawks on defense. As always, you can follow me on X and Blue Sky at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Rang. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. When we come back tomorrow, we are diving into a new game week and what's new with the Washington Commanders. We'll see how their game plays out with Kansas City tonight, and then we'll be looking at all the changes that they've had on that roster, some of the injuries they've dealt with, and much more. It'll be a jam-packed episode coming your way, so make sure to listen in and enjoy the rest of your Monday night. Go Hawks.